Good morning, everyone. Good morning and a warm welcome to this EU Green Week partner event dedicated to the zero pollution in Nordic capital region. We are gonna start slowly and surely and leave the latecomers join, but I want to respect the Nordic punctuality and it's 10:02 and I would like to start. So my name is Louise Coffineau. I'm Policy Advisor for Environment and Climate at EuroCities, and I'm delighted to moderate this session. During this session, we'll discuss how to accelerate the transition towards the zero pollution environment, first with a presentation from the European Commission on the recently adopted Zero Pollution Action Plan, and then with a couple of presentations from the Nordic capital regions on pollution prevention and remediation. You will have the opportunity to ask questions to speakers by writing them in the chat that you have on the bottom right. I will take them all together towards the end of the session. I will also kindly ask you to mute yourself when you're not speaking to make sure that we can hear what the speakers have to say. So the Nordic capital regions are front runners in the green transition. They are well known for their green cities, full of accessible green and blue spaces, and surrounded by vast forests and lakes. It has the potential to offer green and blue solutions to tackle the challenges posed by climate change and by the environmental pollution. During this session, we'll see how they are leading this transition towards a zero pollution environment. But first, back to the Zero Pollution Action Plan. Dear Mr. De Genio, a warm welcome to you. Thank you very much for taking the time to be with us this morning. You are Senior Expert Policy Assistant at DG Environment at the European Commission, and you will present us the Zero Pollution Action Plan. The floor is yours. You have 15 minutes. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everybody. Pleasure to be here. Now it's very good to see so much interest, in particular from regions and cities, because I think they're very important partners in our strive for zero pollution. And I will give you a short presentation. I have shared the slides with the colleagues already, and I will not go through all my slides in the interest of time. But obviously, if you have questions afterwards, we can go into more detail. So let me share my presentation, and I'll turn my camera off also. It will hope improve the quality of the sound. So the Zero Pollution Action Plan was adopted on the 12th of May. And I'm just trying to slide. Yes, here we go. So normally you should see the first slide. And as you know, pollution is one of the various planetary crises that we are facing. And we all know with the European Green Deal that we can only face them in an effective way if we tackle them together. So the climate, biodiversity, resource, and pollution crisis, they're all intrinsically interlinked. And of course, when it comes to pollution, we also have a very strong evidence base on the health effects of pollution, and there's increasing evidence base on the various pollution diseases or pollution effects that can be monitored. What I was quite impressed most recently with a study where mental health was basically shown, the link between mental health and pollution. But I think you know that mostly when it comes to air noise pollution, the question of premature death is always the one that has been discussed. And here you see some statistics that were originally from the WHO, which is why it is not surprising that our president from the outset, when she started in her mandate, set the health of our citizens at the heart also of the European Green Deal, and the zero pollution ambition was an expression of that. And you may have seen the slide on the European Green Deal. It has quite a variety of initiatives, and I think Ursula von der Leyen said something about 50 actions for 2050. And within that, you had a number of strategic activities or actions that basically were framing the mandate in more detail, from climate change to circular economy, biodiversity, as farm to fork, and the smart and sustainability initiative, to name a few. And all of them have been basically shaped in the last year, over the last year, and have been published over the last year. And one thing that I want to show here explicitly, or say explicitly with this slide, is that if you look in these strategies from last year, you will find in all of them, or at least most of them, a pollution dimension. So the circular economy is very strong and very, very explicit on microplastics. When it comes to nutrients and pesticides, you will find already some initiatives on nutrients, sorry, in the farm to fork and in the biodiversity and so on. So when you now look at the zero pollution ambition for a toxic-free environment, so first of all, I should say it is part of, there are two components that are part of the zero pollution ambition: the chemical strategy that was already adopted last October, and the zero pollution action plan today. And so you see a little bit with this picture that the action plan came a little bit to close the circle, came a little bit at the end of this whole strategic mapping that we have done in the European Green Deal. And so it is slightly different in nature than the other initiatives, because of course it relies on all the initiatives and actions already taken, and it tries to join up and integrate this into a holistic picture so that all actions together deliver on the zero pollution ambition. That's important to know when you read the document, if you haven't done so yet. It was developed over the last couple of months, already since last October. You may know that we've done an online public consultation, and if you're interested in the outcome of that and the results also of our other outreach activities, then you can see now the report online. I think it's a quite interesting read, and we've tried to incorporate as many aspects of that consultation as possible in the document. Now, coming to the document, I said already, it sets a little bit the frame. It ties the various dots together. And one of that is basically to bring it in line with a long-term and mid-term ambition, and define what do we actually want to achieve by 2050, when we have already defined that we would like to achieve climate neutrality, for example, as EU. So we have set out a vision in the document, and here you see it quoted, and that basically says that we are aiming to achieve pollution of air, water, and soil that is reduced to levels that are not considered harmful anymore to health and a natural ecosystem. So that's more a local dimension, but at the same time that we respect the boundaries of our planet, the boundaries of our planet that the planet can cope with. Sorry, formulation is a bit grammatically difficult to express, but it basically talks about the planetary boundaries, where we look at the overall picture of pollution, because of course pollution knows no borders, and that is how we want to create a toxic-free environment. As an interim stepping stone, we have also identified additional targets. You know, of course, that for 2030, the SDGs are our main compass. There are many targets. Not all of them are linked to 2030, but there are many targets and objectives in EU law. If you look at the air quality directives or the air emission directives, if you look at the water legislation, marine legislation, so there are a lot of different specific objectives that address pollution. But we felt in order to get a little bit of a more comprehensive and overarching picture, and also from a communication point of view, to be able to communicate and monitor the progress on the zero pollution ambition, we have defined 6 targets, 2 in the area which are more closely linked to health, which you see here in blue. So this is about the health impacts from air pollution and from transport noise. 2 related more to biodiversity and ecosystems. This is on one hand air pollution threatening biodiversity, and then again what I mentioned earlier, which is also in the biodiversity strategy, the nutrient and pesticide and also antimicrobial reductions, 50% reductions that have been announced before. And 2 are in the area which are under the headline Sustainable Consumption and Production, linked to plastics and to waste. One important element is the what we call the reversing of the pyramid, a little bit inspired by also the waste hierarchy. We all know that prevention is much better than remediation, or much less costly, and makes much more sense. But in reality, it is of course difficult to achieve, and we often have not done that. We first went on to pollute the environment, then we realized there is a harm, and then we started to think about remediating. So how can we turn this around? So we have made some suggestions. I would say the theory is already well known and long discussed. We have the principles in the treaty and so on and so forth. But the question is, how do we now translate this into practice? And you find here a number of detailed kind of elements, and these are also elements that have gone through the various parts of the action plan then. Another element which I've highlighted already briefly earlier is the integrated nature of the approach. So we have, of course, lots of things already ongoing in the topical areas of air, noise, soil, water, marine, and so on. There is really a lot of things ongoing, but we feel that there is added value in bringing all of this together amongst the pollution dimensions, so to say, and then really creating a strong interface to the various sectors and driving forces to the economic activities, which we are in the process of transforming as part of the European Green Deal anyway, when it comes to transport, to get climate neutral energy and so on and so forth. So we see there is a real importance to have an integrated approach, both across pollution areas, but also across Green Deal areas with the very economic activities. The action plan is divided into 7 sections, 3 thematic ones, which I've already hinted to: health and well-being, biodiversity or the planetary boundaries, and production and consumption. And then, of course, there's a number of cross-cutting aspects, which are the so-called enablers, where implementation and enforcement is a very important aspect that features in many places. We have the societal engagement, whether it's economic actors, societal actors, and so on and so forth. I think that is a very important part. And we have also, of course, tracking progress and anticipating the pollution trends as part of the action plan. But I should underline that there's a very strong chapter also on the global and international aspects of pollution. And we actually decided also that sometimes we put these pollution sections in the thematic sections, because it is really, you can't disentangle these elements with the EU borders, because a lot of our pollution is both being imported and exported, and we have a global pollution footprint as EU as well, and that is something we want to look into more and work more in the future as part of the action plan as well. So then, coming slowly to the end, you will see that we have 9 flagships in this action plan. These are meant to be integrated projects where we're trying to bring together, as I said earlier, these different dimensions. For example, when we link health data and inequalities with pollution data and show a little bit what the interface is. Or, for instance, which is, I think, is particularly important for you, is the flagship number 2, supporting urban action on zero pollution. But there are a number of other actions which I think are interesting for you in this respect, when it comes to the built environment, for example, linked to the renovation wave, or promoting zero pollution across regions. So these are meant to be small but inspirational projects to bring different constituencies together, and there I'm embedded into a wider set of actions, which, as I said, should not be read by themselves. These are actions that are in the action plan, but there are many more pollution actions which we didn't list again, that are already mentioned in other initiatives. I will not go into the detail here. That's why I said I would ask the organizers to share the slides. But you see here a little bit the timelines of the various legislative and non-legislative initiatives. And then I picked out a little bit one area simply because I thought that's the one that you may be more interested in with looking at the implementation of this in the urban context. And that's the action area 1, so the improving health and well-being, where we of course look at air, noise, water aspects that affect and soil that affect human health. Implementation, international action is very important in that section. And we make a close link to the smart and sustainable mobility and climate action activities. And I mentioned already that there's the flagship on supporting zero pollution urban actions under this heading. And so I've finished now because I will not go into the detail on the zero pollution monitoring and outlook. Just some information here if you want to have a look, and we can discuss that later. I will not go into detail on another paper that we published in addition to the action plan, which is on digital solutions for zero pollution. Again, something we can discuss. There's some interesting elements in there also for the urban context, but in the interest of time, I will not elaborate now in more detail. And I want to finish with the zero pollution stakeholder platform. We have just launched this last week in the Green Week on the last day. It's a joint endeavor with the Committee of the Regions in partnership with us, co-leading the platform. And we have basically announced it now. We are now making this operational, and we'll get more information out and start really working on it in the second half of the year. It is a platform like other platforms where we want to specifically zoom into pollution-related topics, but we want to share best practices and create a certain exchange of experiences. But we want to create synergies, and particularly also maybe agree on joint initiatives or work very closely together with the various other platforms, because as I said, we believe in the fact that there is a lot of pollution dimensions in these other activities. The Climate Pact, for example, if you read the document, has already quite a lot of links to the zero pollution ambition, and so does, of course, the Green City Accord, which is of course one of our flagships in relation to urban activities. So with that, I'll stop here. The last slide is just giving you all the references in case you haven't seen the documents. And I hope that you that you have been able to participate a little bit last week in the Green Week, and I'm really super happy to be here in this partner event, because I really thought from the Green Week, we just got statistics this morning, that the partner events are really the ones that make the difference. With one event that we organize from the Commission ourselves, it's often very difficult to reach a high number of people and a diverse number of people. It's always the same crowd that comes, let's say, to our meetings. But the partner events we have nearly 600 partner events. And there have been, to our understanding, if I'm not mistaken, I don't want to say something wrong now, but tens of thousands of people have been invited or participating in these partner events. And they are really very, very interesting, very diverse, and pick up the message and make it their own in the sense of the context of what these events are all about. So I'm very much looking forward to this event as one of these partner events. And I'll stop here in case there are questions already now or later in the question and answer sessions. I will be there as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. De Genio, for this overview on the Zero Pollution Action Plan. I will take my privilege as a moderator to ask the first questions to you, and then I invite the participants to write their questions in the chat box, and we'll take them all together at the end. Mr. De Genio, you started your presentation by saying that cities and regions are absolutely important on the zero pollution. And indeed, we do believe that the implementation has to be done at local level, and therefore an intense collaboration is needed. So what do you foresee in the Zero Pollution Action Plan to make sure that the local authorities work very closely with the EU to ensure a good and efficient implementation of the action plan?
Yeah, I think I said it in the last slide on the platform. I mean, the whole platform idea is centered around the idea that we don't do this as a European administration, but we do it from the outset with the regional and local actors. That's why we partnered with the Committee of the Regions, But we will, of course, invite also other actors, and we will try to find a framework that is not static, so that it's not one representative of the regions, but we'll try to find ways in which we can then really have dedicated discussions on particular topics. Of course, it's always a mix of having the governmental or administrative part of the story brought together. But I think for us, it's also important that we bring local and regional actors together, from businesses, from health services, from transport, from engaged citizens. I think it's something that we felt as a very positive experience, is if we bring together more the different actors, which is happening, but often it is done more in a kind of way. Now we only talk about environment, and then the transport colleagues join. But ultimately, we need to develop joint projects. These are joint efforts. And of course, this is not one size fits all. So it's not something that we can say, this is how it's done, and then everybody just has to implement it. So I think that's our ambition, to create a platform where these discussions can not only take place in the platform itself, but where the platform inspires discussions like the ones that you're having now, where you yourself think a little bit about what would actually help us in our context, to then translate all this into our city, into our region, in practice. We know that pollution and EU law and overall, I think the vice president from the Committee of the Regions gave a figure of 70% of that being directly addressed by competences of the local and regional level. So I think it's an important dialogue. It's not a new dialogue, so I don't think we start from scratch, but it's one that we want to just take to the next level. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And indeed, we will see with the next presentation what cities and regions are already doing for fostering a zero pollution environment at local level, and also what still needs to be done in order to accelerate this transition. So without further delay, thank you again, Mr. De Genio, for your presentation. We want to travel to the city of Helsinki now. I will invite Mr. Jussi Kulonpalo, project manager for the Urban Innovative Action project called HOPE on air quality, who is gonna make a short presentation. So Jussi, the floor is yours. You have 12 minutes.
Thank you, Louise. Just a moment. And now I'm actually at the very end of my presentation, so apologies for that. Let's go into the beginning. So my name is Jussi Kulonpalo, as introduced, from City of Helsinki. And I will present you some of the early results from our project. We call it the HOPE project, so it's healthy outdoor premises for everyone. Just briefly, the funding is by Urban Innovative Action Initiative. So this is a European Regional Development Fund initiative. And one of the key points here is that this is an initiative, if you don't know too well, where the cities were invited to present their challenges and ideas. And then we come up with the project where we test things. So it's okay to be a bit experimental with this. Okay. The project has been going on for quite a while, but we still have less than a year to go. So it's not quite finished yet. And the partnership. So City of Helsinki is the leader. We have two divisions from the City of Helsinki: economic development and urban environment. Then we have University of Helsinki. They have maybe the biggest share of actual project implementation. They have Vaisala, a Finnish technology company. They provide equipment. We have a small startup called a Useless Company. We have Forum Virium Helsinki with the City of Helsinki Innovation Company. Then we have the Finnish Meteorological Institute. And we have a Helsinki Region Environmental Services Authority. So this is the partnership, right? So what we do is a big project. We do many things, but I will not go into this. This is basically the main parts of the whole project of what we are doing. But I will now focus on only, because time is limited, I will focus on 4 themes, 4 things, 4 elements. And these are chosen with the idea that this is where the main results of the project actually will come out of. So we have the citizen science theme. Then we have what we call My Air Quality, which is about participatory governance. Then we have a kind of a showcase of environmental open data. And then we have become the main scientific outcome of the project. So the air quality index 2.0. Okay, first, we did the kind of citizen science thing here is that this is a part which the people tend to be the most interested in our project, especially the citizens. So University of Helsinki, they have this MegaSense research team, and they've developed an air quality sensor device, like a mobile, low-cost sensor device. You know, there are a lot of projects like this where these kind of things are used or have been developed. So this is just our attempt. So it's a portable device. It uses your mobile phone to transfer the data, and then the citizen or any person will carry it around outdoors, preferably. It works indoors as well, but outdoors basically. And you have the device, so which transfers the data to our backend for our the measurement data that we use. And then on the app, the person using it will see kind of his or her personal air quality or air pollution exposure, on a map and that kind of thing. And we had a big pool of citizens using this, and well, here's what it looks like. We already have a second version, which is a bit smaller with nicer looking maybe, but this is what it is basically. It's a kind of a big black box that you carry around with you, measures certain things, particulate matter, ozone, carbon monoxide, so on and so on, the basic air quality components, right? And for that, in the project, we've organized 7 campaigns. We have 3 different city districts where we are actually implementing the project. They're all a bit different. They all have their own bit different air quality challenges. The one on the bottom is kind of a new waterfront area where construction dust is a big issue because people live there and it's still being constructed for next 5-15 years. So construction dust and traffic exhaust gases. Then the middle one is kind of an older inner city area with there's lots of traffic passing through a very densely built residential area. So traffic combustion, that kind of thing. And in the north, the one on the top is kind of an old suburban area where traffic exhaust and wood burning is the issue, right? Anyway, so that was the measuring thing. So the second part is the My Air Quality thing. So this is an experiment in participatory governance where we've developed an online application for voting for citizens. Then we co-created and with the citizens and with specialists a host of different air quality interventions where the idea is that they will somehow improve the local air quality. We made a big marketing effort for how to have citizens find for this, and then they voted for these things. And in the end, 16 interventions were chosen. And this is a wide variety of things. It starts from very simple things like focused high-pressure street washing during the street dust season, that kind of thing. Or we have free passes for the city bike system in Helsinki. We are organizing an e-cargo system bike that citizens can use. There are several mobile applications which have the theme of air quality and this and that. And we also procured and installed the vehicle winter tire recognition system on streets in 2 places in Helsinki. And so many things happened, and we reached 70,000 Helsinki citizens, although not all of them voted, of course, but these were people who were basically reached by the campaigns we had and so on. So we created awareness, right? So that's that. Then let me look at the clock. What's my time? Then the green parts is an interesting thing. So basically, this is a showcase because the measuring data we collect in the project is opened as an open data for anyone to use, for companies, for any interested people. So we have open APIs and this and that. And this thing is, so University of Helsinki Digital Geographic Lab, they developed kind of a showcase of what to use with the air quality data we have. And it's a bit more than that, actually. So it's basically an online route planning app. There are plenty of those, but this is for pedestrians and cyclists. It works for Helsinki region. And the thing is that you can choose the fastest route from A to B, obvious, but you can also choose a route with the best air quality along the way, or a route with the least urban noise along the way, or the one with the most urban greenery along the way. And they're actually developing this further, but this is what we have. And it's been very popular considering that it's kind of experimental showcase, and it's kind of a test case really, and but thousands of people are using this, so it's quite a nice thing. It's kind of a big success for us. Okay, and then the last thing, and the project team, especially the university people, they think this is the main outcome, the most important thing that we come up with the project. So this is kind of the science state of the art. So we've developed Air Quality Index 2.0. Well, most of you know that there is Air Quality Index, which is a global index that's used for reporting air quality. The thing is that since air pollutant levels, especially the urban ones, they're rapidly going down in European Union at least. Well, rapidly, but anyway, they're going down, which is a great thing. But this means that the global air quality index, we feel that it doesn't really reflect the local urban air pollution's negative health effects as much as it could. It doesn't include parameters for local combustion sources, which is a big issue. And the point being that since the combustion sources, which would be like traffic exhaust and wood burning, basically, they contain ultrafine particles, which are the most damaging for the human health, especially for vulnerable groups, right? So what we did is that we created, Air Quality Index 2.0, and this was done by adding 3 new components, parameters into the kind of the index, and these are black carbon, these are lung deposited surface area, so LDPS, and particle number concentration. So these are kind of 3 elements which now, if this were to be used on a global context or even in a European context, that would provide much better information about the actual health effects that people experience from air pollution. And the main point being that this is, as I said, just adding, I have to underline this, that this is basically just adding traffic exhaust and residential wood burning and their health effects into the index. So we feel that this is the main thing, the main outcome. This is part of the research activity, academic research in the project, and it goes on, obviously. This is what our team does at the university anyway. Okay, hey, that was my presentation. You will find from these links more information about us and all that, so thank you.
Thank you very much, Jussi. I have been so interested by this way to choose my cycling route to come to the office in the morning with the best air quality of Lesnos. I would be absolutely delighted to use it. Sounds absolutely fantastic. A short follow-up question on my side, Jussi. What would be, according to you, the main benefits of this Air Quality Index 2.0, and where would you like to deploy it first?
Well, I have to underline that I'm not a scientist, so my replies are based on what I've been learning on the project. But our people, the researchers, they say that this would be for the cities, the urban context, this would be the best. Because basically we get most of the air pollution, at least here in Nordic countries, that we don't much have industry in the urban areas anymore. But we have a lot of, the traffic exhausts are a problem. And then the wood burning in residential areas, which is a bit counterintuitive, but it's still, and people don't really realize that the kind of small scale wood burning is an issue. And obviously if you think about the global south, it's even more pressing issue there, although they have all kinds of, pollution issues. But yeah, I think this is the thing. It's just basically improving and taking further the air quality index that is being used.
Thank you very much, Jussi. Sorry, I was muting our latecomer.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot for your presentation. We stay in the urban area and we move to the city of Stockholm with Mr. Juha Salonsaari. Juha, you are head of the water management unit for the city of Stockholm, and you are going to tell us a bit about water management. The floor is yours. You have 12 minutes.
Thank you. I will start the presentation. I hope it works. Can you see it?
Yes, very well.
Great, thank you. As I said, my name is Juha Salonsaari, and thank you very much for this opportunity for me to present our work. I'm the head of the water management unit at the Environment and Health Department in the City of Stockholm. I have a background as an aquatic biologist and a chemist. I've been working with the implementation of the Water Framework Directive, both on the national scale, regional scale, and now at the local level at the City of Stockholm since 2004. And during my presentation, I will try to give you a quick ride through the work Stockholm is doing for a better water quality. And I will focus on the challenges regarding reaching good status for the hydromorphological quality elements. And that is in large part equal to the aquatic habitats. And the reason I've chosen this topic is that even though we're doing a lot to lower the emissions of both nutrients and hazardous substances, both in air and water, this won't be enough for reaching good ecological status as whole. We also need to focus on the habitats. And habitats is a particularly tricky question in an urban environment impacted by humans for centuries. As you all know, implementing the Water Framework Directive will be quite a costly exercise, but you have to ask yourselves, what's in it for us? What's in it for an urban environment? What's in it for a city like Stockholm? And I would say that water-related ecosystem services are actually key factors for a living and sustainable city. And Stockholm as a city, it markets itself as a city of water. And the ecosystem services that water provides are not only important for the people living in Stockholm, but also important for tourists visiting Stockholm. You can, for example, take a swim in the middle of the city or go fishing next to the city hall. And the pike that I've caught in the picture in the middle of this slide is not from Stockholm, but it is a good example of what you can catch in the city if you like. In 2016, we conducted a value estimation study for reaching good ecological status in all our water bodies. And it showed us that the people living in Stockholm really appreciate the waters and value them high. The monetary value lies somewhere around 250 million euros, calculated over a time period of 10 years. And the costs for reaching good or better water quality are roughly calculated to be in the same amount. But it is important to stress the fact that these calculations are mostly focused on eutrophication and hazardous substances, because that is what we had to go on at the moment or at the time. The cost for reaching good ecological status as whole, also regarding the hydromorphological quality elements, and that is restoring the habitats and so on, is not fully included yet anyways in the calculations. Even though the city has a successful history of water management, I would say that the work took a substantial leap forward thanks to the Water Framework Directive and the Bathing Water Directive and so on. The work with the classification on the national and regional level and the pressure analysis and the measures on the regional scale are done by five river basin district authorities in Sweden, and the end products are 5 equally likewise water district management plans that includes quite general and overall targeting programs and measures. And these programs and measures are targeting authorities and municipalities, that is cities like Stockholm, in order for us to do what's needed to reach the environmental goals also stated in the overall action plans. So much of the work is actually done by municipalities in Sweden in order to reach the environmental goals in the Water Framework Directive. The City of Stockholm, quite early in the process, realized that the regional programs and measures, and sometimes quite coarse data setup, wouldn't be enough for conducting measures at a local scale. So we need local knowledge and local data in order to pinpoint with more accuracy where, how, when, by whom, and of course by what cost local measures should be carried out. And this is the main reason that the City Council adopted what's called the Action Plan for Better Water Status in 2015 and gave us, the Environmental Health Department, a mission to produce local programs of measure, one for each water body. And we are actually, we have adopted 6 of these local action plans at the moment. So we have some yet to go. I would say since the very first water program back in the 70s in Stockholm, we've done a lot. But there's still a lot to do before we can meet the national, the local, and of course the European environmental goal. And I would say that this is especially a great challenge in a growing city. And I think that the local programs of measure will constitute a basis for how these challenges should be met. Within Stockholm's geographical area, we have 21 surface water bodies. That is, if we compare that to all the 27,000 water bodies in Sweden as a total, it's not so much, and it's easy to grasp on. When I worked on the national level, I had 27,000 water bodies to care about, so it's a little bit easier to come on the local level and just care about 21. Our major environmental impacts in Stockholm are eutrophication, of course, hazardous substances, but also altered habitats, and the major sources of pressures, or the major causes of these are contaminated stormwater, untreated wastewater from storm overflows and faulty connections. We also have a great deal of problems with old legacies that we are trying to treat as good as we can nowadays, and of course the migration barrier and morphological alterations in our habitats due to exploitation in water near the shorelines. If we take a closer look at the fish population in one of our most central water bodies, that would be Riddarfjärden, situated in the central parts of Stockholm, we have seen that there is a lot of fish in them, a lot of perch and large ones too. A catch of a perch around 1 kilo is not a rare catch in the city, and the distribution between predators like pike and perch versus cyprinids like roach and so on is quite good as well. But we have seen that the younger year classes, the fish fry, are missing in large part, and this is a direct effect of hydromorphological changes. We're simply lacking enough spawning areas for the fish to spawn in the central part of the city. Lake Mälaren, in which Riddarfjärden is a part of, is, however, a large lake, so the fish population can be upheld by functional areas and in other parts of the lake, and the fish migrate, of course, through the lake. But in order to have a sustainable and functional ecosystem in whole in the central parts of Sweden, we need to address the problems with faulty habitats. So we therefore gave some consultants a big mission to verify and update classifications of the elements, including determining reference conditions. And I won't go into details about the reference conditions, but that has been a tricky question because we didn't have a time machine. It would have been the best, of course, but it would totally have eaten the budget. And we also gave them a mission to describe the current situation and investigate if it's possible to reach good ecological status regarding the hydromorphological quality of elements. And if the urban environment complicates the restoration to natural conditions, they should give us technical measures that gives us similar results. I will focus on one detail, and that's the hydromorphological surveys done. We've done this in order to classify some of the hydromorphological quality elements. And to do that, we need knowledge about how the bottoms looks like, what kind of structures do we find there. And now we have really cool 3D maps of all our central water bodies, so we can see all kinds of structures there, and we find a lot of interesting things like shipwrecks, old cars, motorcycle, lawn movers, barrels, sofas, everything you can see, and in total over 100, almost several hundred dumped items through our waters, and that's of course rubbish, and it's not good for the environment, especially if there are cars leaking oil and so on. In the picture you can see a red Toyota reported missing in 2004. And we're not sure if these kind of structures are positive or not for the classification of the hydromorphological status. But some fish seems to be hiding inside the shipwrecks and the cars. I can, as a parenthesis, mention that the city of New York, for example, have been using old and stripped subway trains to build artificial reefs in their waters. And I have had some really nice snorkeling around a dumped military vehicle in the Red Sea. So aquatic organisms are actually using or benefiting from artificial constructions in the water where other habitats are scarce. This is one of the examples of a measure presented or proposed by the consultants. It's an artificial reef construction in the middle of the city with some shallow areas suitable for spawning inside of the reef construction. And it would be very exciting to see how the politicians react to these kind of measures, because they are in some cases quite bold. They can conflict with boat traffic and other things, but it is actually these kind of measures that will be needed for us to restore the lost ecosystem services or the ecosystem functions in our urban waters. Another not as equally bold measures is actually to reuse old Christmas trees to build artificial but biological reefs. And this is a very successful project. We have been doing this since 2014 when I started in the city. It's been a collaboration between the Swedish Anglers Association and WWF and some other parties. And we're actually reusing these trees donated by people living in the city. So it has been a very nice project. People are coming to us, having a cup of coffee, talking about fish, leaving the Christmas trees, and we're building artificial reefs from them. And the fish are actually spawning at these reefs already in the following spring. So it has been a very cheap, very common and peopleably accepted measure. So, given this background, are we on the right target? Is it possible to reach good ecological status regarding all quality elements? Is it okay to go from a city to something natural? And of course, the answer is unfortunately, but it's no. You can't completely take away the city. The alterations are too big. There is no technical way of fully restore our waters to natural conditions, and the costs for this, even if it could work, would be astronomical. And the only way to fully achieve the goals in the Water Framework Directive is actually to move the capital, and that would be a measure I would have a hard time getting acceptance for in the City Hall, I think. But we can do a lot more than we've done before. We can improve the conditions for ecosystem functions, viable habitats, and stronger populations. And when we plan for new city areas, for example, so we can do this, and we can also conduct measures in the existing urban environment, like the artificial reef I've mentioned before, and continue creating spawning areas out of Christmas trees donated by the people. So there's a lot to be done, and we can continue doing what we're already doing for better environment. However, in order to be able to focus on the right and achievable target, I think we should discuss the use of exemptions from the overall target of good ecological status, or the possibility to classify some of our water bodies, or at least the most impacted water bodies, as heavily modified. I will wrap up by doing some commercial about our website Miljöbarometern, in which you can learn more about our water work. It is unfortunately in Swedish only, but it could perhaps act as a source of inspiration, if not more. So that was everything for me. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Juha. Very, very interesting. Very interesting presentation. It's also great to see the obstacles also you're facing when you want, to reach this, the goals of the Water Framework Directive, the practical obstacles. But you say that to reach this status, it will require to move the city, or it will require astronomical cost. But do you see a risk if you lower the ambition when you're talking about this exemption from reaching good ecological status?
No, I would say on the contrary. Exemptions should, of course, only be used when it's impossible to reach good ecological status because of the technical reasons or where the costs heavily exceeds the benefits. I would say that using exemptions would make it possible for us or easier for us to focus on the right targets, the measures that's really needed to enhance the water quality and enhance the habitats without risking the capital, the people living there.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much. Perhaps a last one. Did I understand correctly when you say that municipalities, cities have a responsibility to work for better water status in law?
Yes, that is correct. The water framework is implemented in Swedish law, in our environmental laws, and by them a city like Stockholm is obliged to follow the overall programs and measures adopted by the district authorities. So we have to do what it's stated in them. That's correct. Okay.
Well, thank you very much for your presentation. So we're leaving the urban area and we're moving to Oslo region with Turid Wolf Knudsen. Turid is international advisor for the inlanded county, and she's going to tell us about climate adaptation using nature-based solutions and VR technology. I'm very much looking forward to your presentation, Turid. You have 12 minutes.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. Just waiting for there it is. I guess it's working. Yeah. So thank you for that introduction, Louise. My name is Turid Wolf Knudsen. I'm from Innlandet County. It is in the Oslo region, but I will give a more rural perspective for my presentation today. I'm here to tell you about a learning platform for nature-based solutions that we have developed. First, I will give you a short introduction to the concept of nature-based solutions and give some background about the Fysikos project, which was the starting point for us to really get creative around how to educate people about green solutions. I will end this presentation with a teaser for the VR solution together with my good colleague from the Norwegian Geotechnical Institute, James Strout. It will show you how a nature-based solution prevents pollutants entering the river. It won't give you the full 3D experience though, but you will get a feel of how this platform works. So let's start with the basics. Nature-based solutions, often called green solutions, are based on the idea of working with nature instead of against it. We have tried to tame nature for generations, and it seems Mother Nature is starting to rebel. Nature-based solutions, although a relatively new concept, is not new in practice. There are many measures around the world that would fall under this umbrella that has been working for centuries and are still working today. What you see on the photo to your left is a traditional engineering solution, often called gray solutions, to protect against floods. While effective in terms of enhancing security for the population, it does not yield many other benefits. In fact, it's pretty invasive in this landscape, don't you think? And how many fish do you think would thrive here? To your right, you see a sketch of a nature-based solution to protect against floods. This is a receding flood barrier that protects the biodiversity in both the river, the forest and the insects, birds and other species that live here. We will revisit such a receded flood barrier a little bit later. So while gray solutions are effective protection measures and are thus often needed when safety and security are at stake, we need to consider other options too. To put it a bit tabloid, we cannot asphalt all of our rivers, right? Green solutions come with a range of co-benefits in addition to the safety aspect. I mentioned biodiversity and ecological enhancement, but there are many other co-benefits that will vary depending on the specific solution. The goal of all of them is to increase both ecological, social, and economic resilience in the local community. It stimulates the green economy and it can improve health and quality of life. Aesthetically, these nature-based solutions are much less invasive in the landscape. This screenshot of our VR solution shows how planting trees can be an effective measure against avalanches. This example is taken from the Pyrenees. So a little backstory. Innlandet County is part of a Horizon project called Physikos, which means according to nature in Greek. The main objective of Physikos is to implement and show that a variety of green solutions across Europe are viable, cost-effective, and implementable. The demonstration sites in this project are in Gudbrandsdalen, Norway, Cerchio River Basin in Italy, and the Pyrenees in France and Spain. A commonality among these sites is that they are all rural mountain areas. There have been quite a few projects on nature-based solutions in recent years, but they have primarily focused on urban areas. The project is led by the Norwegian Geotechnical Institute in Oslo. So in Physikos, Innlandet County was tasked with providing a learning platform for politicians, decision makers, and contractors to introduce them to the concept of nature-based solutions. If the goal is to see more such solutions, then the people who adopt measures and those who are going to build them need to have a good grasp on what nature-based solutions are, why they matter, and how they can be built. Originally, the approved application called for a webinar and a video. However, we wanted to up the stakes a little. So we decided to employ new digital realities as the tool for achieving this goal. However, since this was not part of the original approved application, we had to finance this separately. By finding good partners locally, we were able to assemble an awesome team of people with diverse competencies who all contributed financially. After a public procurement procedure, Sopra Steria, a global IT company, were chosen. We reasoned that a video is quickly outdated, while a VR solution can be technically upgraded almost indefinitely as new technology emerges. So we therefore believe that this platform will have a much longer life. We also knew from previous experiences that VR is a powerful pedagogical tool because it's visual. You can learn a lot in a short time. In our case, we can go to locations all over Europe to see a wide range of different green solutions for different challenges. The screenshot you see here shows the 4 sites that are in the platform as of now, where you can learn about measures to mitigate flood risk in Lillehammer, Norway, agricultural runoff in Tuscany, and avalanches and rock falls in the Pyrenees. Since the theme of this year's Green Week is pollution, I wanted to show you a teaser from Lillehammer, from Jurekstad in Lillehammer, where a receded flood barrier will protect agricultural land from leaching nutrients and pesticides into the river, as well as microplastics from a football field. All this can be achieved while preserving biodiversity in the river and a riparian forest. I am very grateful that my good colleague James from the Norwegian Geotechnical Institute will now take the floor to show you a teaser of this platform. Just bear in mind, you will not get the full 3D experience, but you will get a little feel of how this is built. So, James, are you ready?
Just let your screen go and I'll start sharing.
Great.
Okay, it should come up any second.
There it is.
Okay, Tudy, you can go ahead and take the commentary. I'll just follow through as we planned.
Yeah. So this shows the 4 different issues in 4 different locations in Europe. And then, as I said, we will go into the local measure here in Lillehammer to show you flood mitigation measures.
Do you have audio, Turi?
No, I thought you. Oh, okay. I can talk. So this is Jorikstad in Lillehammer. Okay. Where a side river meets the main river, and this can also cause a lot of problems. There are usually a lot of problems with the side rivers. And you see the mountains in the distance, and trouble really arises when heavy snow melting coincides with heavy rain. And this area floods almost every year, sometimes severely. So we can go ahead and click on the next sign. We are now by the riverside, and we are about to see what happens, how fast the water can rise. It can rise by several meters in only a couple of days. And that means that the water will pick up speed and bring with it all sort of sediments and debris. So you see here the water rising. And if you look on the other side of the river, you see a forest. This is a riparian forest that has high ecological value. And this area actually needs to be flooded every once in a while to preserve its biodiversity. So we can go into that forest now, James. This is a depiction of this riparian forest that needs to flood, while a lot of the other parts of this area should not flood. So you need to have some flooding and then stop it somewhere else. And that's what this solution will show. So I think we can go to the next module. This is a football field during a flood, and you can imagine all the microplastics getting into the water. It's also a lot of agricultural land in low-lying land here. And that means when it floods, you will have a lot of pesticides and nutrients, normally phosphor and nitrogen, and also pesticides that will flow into the river. And when it flows into the river here, it eventually becomes a problem for the oceans, as we all know, the rivers end in the oceans. So this is not a local problem. This is a global problem. Okay, we can move on. So the proposed solution here is to build a receded flood barrier. It's kind of dark right now, but you see it on your left side. To the right, James, to the right, you see the riparian forest that we want to flood. And then to the left of the barrier, you see the agricultural land and the football field that we want to stop flooding from happening. So pretty soon you will see what happens when a flood occurs and the water rises. There we go. And the barrier will stop it from where it doesn't need to go. So we can take a short trip up to the barrier, James. So you see here how it protects certain areas while letting the river expand, because we have built ourselves very close to the river in generations, and it means that the rivers don't have room to maneuver. It does now. It is allowed to expand, but we are stopping it from reaching the agricultural land and the football field with the microplastics. So this is a good example of how a nature-based solution can hinder pollution into the river while also protecting safety and security for the inhabitants. Okay, James, I think our time's pretty much up, so I will stop here.
Yeah,
if there are any.
Release the sharing just a second.
Yep.
Thank you very much, Shurid, and thank you very much, James, for sharing that. It was very interesting. Thanks for this little visit in your region. It was very, very good, and also it helped us to imagine the question you have to face and the solutions you are also putting in place. Shurid, could you tell us a little bit more about the methods you have applied when you have developed this product? How did you get engaged in this process?
Yes, that's a good question, because I think one of the key factors in us being able to do this is a very close collaboration with the developing company Soprasteria, the Norwegian Geotechnical Institute, a green vocational college, and the county. We were extremely engaged in this process because the developing company didn't know much about nature-based solutions, and we didn't know much about the technical solutions. And I think that by collaborating that close, it allowed the solution to be of an even higher quality. I would also like to say that this could only happen during COVID, actually, because if teams were not, the new normal, we would probably not be meeting as often as we did, because we wouldn't have been used to it. And it's a 2-hour train ride from Lillehammer to Oslo. And if we were to meet, we would probably meet every 2 weeks instead of 5 days a week. So COVID actually helped us in this case.
Great, amazing. It's good to hear as well. Some positive out of that. Well, thank you very much, Toril. We are moving to our last presentation, but not least. We're going to the capital region of Denmark with Mr. John Fluberg. John, you are Chief Consultant on Soil and Groundwater, and you are going to tell us about remediation. You have 12 minutes.
Thank you. Can you see my presentation now?
Yes, perhaps you can move it to full mode.
Sure.
Great, thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. In my presentation here, I will move into the topic of soil and groundwater remediation. In Denmark, where I'm from, we get practically all our drinking water from groundwater reservoirs. So the protection of groundwater from pollution is a very high priority and very important for to still have a clean drinking water in the taps. I'm from the capital region of Denmark, and that's the region around Copenhagen, our capital. So we are in the most populated and most urbanized area of Denmark. As an organization, we are a government organization. Our responsibility is, among other things, to protect groundwater from old contaminated sites that we you could say we inherited these sites from all the industrial activities in the 50s, 60s, and 70s before a good environmental legislation was in place, good environmental management. So we've inherited a lot of pollution cases that we have to handle today. So we're going to move in this presentation into the subsurface mainly, and to see what we do to prevent hazardous substances and other contaminants to ruin our groundwater resource. So the challenges you see on this map of Denmark, this is how many contaminated sites we have registered nationwide. It's almost 38,000 sites that have been registered as contaminated or potentially contaminated. That's quite a bit. Luckily, not all of them are a real risk to the groundwater resources, but enough are that it is a big problem. If we zoom in on the capital region, here you see on the right, this is our region. You see how we have a high density of these contaminated sites, and the highest density is in the city of Copenhagen and the suburbs, where there's a long history of industrial activities and many other things that can contamination. And in the northern and northwestern part of the region, there are more agricultural areas, but still many urban centers where there also are old contaminated sites. And we live on top of our groundwater reservoirs and work and pollute and produce and so on, as 75% of the drinking water comes from groundwater within the region, and we import from other regions 25%. So the challenge is that we have a high contamination pressure on our groundwater resource, and we cannot solve this problem just within a few years. So prioritization is very important to solve the problem in the right sequence, you could say, and also innovation of new ideas and methods to go about this problem is important. You see a little more of a close-up of the challenge. If you look on an individual site, we have an industry here that has leaked some hazardous substances into the soil, and eventually it will also go into the groundwater, go with the groundwater flow, and eventually hit the water abstraction well here at the waterworks. And we want to prevent this from happening. You can also see it here on the right. You see more of in a catchment area where you have several contaminated sources here. Which order do they actually hit the extraction well here? Which one should we take first when we do remediation, and do they all pose a real threat to the water resource? That's some of the questions that we have to deal with. Our strategic approach here is basically two main things: that we prioritize these many sites based on risk, and risk is the individual risk at the individual sites depend on many factors, but one important factor is the chemistry and toxicity of the hazardous substance itself. And there we are focusing more on compounds that are the most toxic and are moving most easily in the ground, which means they are water soluble and are not degraded by bacteria or by chemical reactions in the ground, but they are recalcitrant and will stay in the ground for a long time. These are the most problematic compounds. And when we arrange our investigations and risk assessments, we do it in a sequence where we take sites that are contaminated with the most problematic compounds first. And such compounds could be chlorinated solvents. We have seen that in many monitoring programs and so on. But also all the time new compounds are emerging, like PFOS and new pesticides and so on. So it's always a question which compounds you should put first on the list. On our experience, based on our experience, when we go through 100 sites of interest, as a rule of thumb, and do investigations to find out where the real problems are, it's only a small percentage that actually need remediation. But as you go into remediation, it's very costly to do remediation of sites. And therefore, it's very important also to be able to find out where are the real problems located, where are the real sites that you need to do something about. The other leg of the strategic approach we have is a more geographical one, you could say, where we have done what we could call a cost-benefit analysis of the individual groundwater catchment areas that we have in the region. That's what you see on the right, on the map on the right. And to what we really have analyzed is where you get most groundwater protection, so to speak, for the amount of money you need to invest in a given catchment area. So just to cut it down very briefly, in an area, if you have few point sources that could be a risk to the groundwater, and you have plenty of water, then you have a high benefit cost ratio. If you have many point sources and a more limited water resource, you would have a low benefit cost ratio. And then our strategy is to do our activities first in the catchment areas with the higher benefit cost ratio. And if you look at the map here, the brownish areas are the ones where we would have generally fewer contaminated sources and a lot of good water. So that's our strategy. That's where we invest our money first. And if you move further closer to the city of Copenhagen, the center, you have an immediate vicinities, you have many more polluted sites and also in some areas less good water. So there it will take a larger investment to protect the drinking water resources there. It's clear that a strategy like this will have advantages and disadvantages as any strategy. And here it is, of course, that if for the municipalities and waterworks in this area, it is probably frustrating that they are not, that they have to wait in the line before we really are able to come in and do active remediation here. And as time is an issue, because the contaminants are migrating all the time, there can be cases where you will see contamination of water wells. Briefly on our innovation activities, remediation is very expensive, as I mentioned, and therefore we are constantly engaged in innovation projects to find cheaper, greener, and more efficient methods to clean up and prevent groundwater pollution. And this is, by this we hope, and when we find new ways to do things, that we can actually do more for the money, for the budget we have. And we typically organize projects like this with several partners from universities, from the private sector, and other stakeholders to get as much knowledge and skills into the projects as possible. Very quickly, a few examples what we're working on. We're working very much on what we call in situ methods. This is where a classical way of cleaning up groundwater and soil pollution is to excavate or to pump up the water for many years. This is very energy demanding. So we are looking at methods where you actually can treat the contamination down in the ground by injecting bacteria or various reactive chemicals that can destroy the contamination. This requires less energy and therefore is also a greener way and often also a less costly way to do things. And what we're also looking into here, what is becoming more and more as part of the green transition, you can also look at the subsurface as a possibility for energy supply. And this is used more and more, what we call ADIS, which is aquifer thermal energy storage systems, where you actually use heat pumps to extract energy from the groundwater. And just to make a long story on this short, when you do this, this is an office building that would need cool groundwater for cooling in the summer, and will store some hot groundwater from the cooling process that they can use in the winter. But we know that if you heat up the groundwater, you can also make degradation of contaminants happen much quicker and more efficient than at the usual groundwater temperature around 10 degrees Celsius. So we are looking at ways to combine this need for using the subsurface for an energy source, to also combine this with the cleanup of the groundwater by using the thermal effects for enhancing the groundwater cleanup. And this is still, we have done pilot studies that shows that this is actually possible. The big challenge now is that you have to make different sectors, the energy sector, the water supply sector, the remediation sector work together on finding solutions that will work, but that could benefit all partners in the end if it's possible. So, before I wrap up here, an important part is this kind of looks like a dead duck laying here, but it's an illustration to the problem of the innovation gap, as we call it. All the technological development that you need to do is illustrated by the green part here. And even when you have proved your concepts that they're very successful, there's still some important steps to be done if you don't want your otherwise successful development project or innovation project to end on the shelf, is that you have to engage partners, you have to find funding, you have to convince people and make sure that legal and administrative frameworks and so on are in place. So that's also an important part of making innovation work in practice. So to wrap up here, what I'll try to give you a picture of here is that we have adopted a strategic approach for all the individual remediation projects that we do, and this is important for setting an overall direction when you have so many sites to handle. And we also see innovation as an important and necessary part of this in order to develop cheaper, greener, and more efficient methods. And we like to do innovation in close contact with the real problems that we have. And this is also how we can attract other partners like universities and private specialized companies to engage in this, that they like to do innovation close to the real problems that need to be solved. And least but not last, you have to be aware of this generation or innovation gap, as I called it, when you are looking to implement your project successfully. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. Very interesting presentation. Very interesting also to see the real problems, as you call them. In case your strategy does not work, imagine that groundwater in some drinking water catchment areas is contaminated even before you can start preventing actions. How do you deal with that?
Yes, and that that will for sure happen, and it already does, because with this strategy there will be places where there are different conditions. So we actually see contamination of water wells. What can actually be done in a situation like that is that the water abstraction company, they can look for finding another place to put a new well down with clean water, but this becomes more and more difficult because the whole area is utilized. It's hard to find a new place where not somebody else is having a well, for example. And also there's a pressure on the good water quality. So what they can also do is that they can be forced to they need to clean the water. And then, of course, we can treat the water so these hazardous substances does not come into the drinking water that goes to the consumers. But this is really not the solution we're looking for in Denmark, and you cannot get permissions for that, only temporarily at the waterworks. But it becomes more and more of the reality, unfortunately, that you need to clean the water in some places. But it's not a good solution. We have to do it sometimes because prevention is also expensive. If you remediate the contamination sources before they spread, it's much less expensive than if you have to treat the water forever, actually, because that's the situation when the toxic chemicals, they actually hit the water wells. It will take a very long time before it's out of the water again.
Thank you very much, John. So it brings us back to the first presentation from Joachim de Genio. First, we need to prevent, if you remember, the triangle this way, then minimize and control, and at the later stage and in last resort, eliminate and remediate. Thank you very much, John. I will ask all our speakers to put their video on, unmute themselves. We are going to take the Q&A session as from now. Thank you very much to all of you for your presentations. So Joachim, you had a question for Juha first on bathing and drinking water, right?
Yes, if I may. I mean, all the presentations were great. And maybe if I may say, I think for me, what is interesting is if you bring all this together with the different contexts, etc., you could actually develop some links and stories when you engage with citizens or businesses who are not interested maybe so much about the individual project combined.
Joachim, you have to
switch
off your camera. I'm afraid that the connection is too unstable. Can you switch off your camera and ask again? Apologies.
No worries. Probably on my side. Can you hear me better now?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, no, so just thanks again and congratulations to all presentations, all very interesting. I wanted to ask Juha a question by first saying also that obviously you said it yourself, but that there's no misunderstanding. The Water Framework Directive was not designed to ask member states to move their capital cities or any other city. I mean, it's intrinsic in the directive that with the instrument of heavily modified water bodies and other instruments, that of course there are certain givens that are that we have to factor in. But for that, in the urban context, I think it's very important to take the citizens with you on the journey. So my question was, have you factored in a little bit the work that is done in relation to drinking water and bathing water? I looked at the bathing water report, and Stockholm has some excellent land bathing water sites a little bit outside, but there's no bathing opportunity in the center of the city. That can be a factor in bringing people along and explaining the different interconnections and connecting people also with the water stories. So I just was wondering how you factor in the other dimensions of water. You could also mention the flooding, of course. I think it's very important to really get citizens and businesses, etc., engaged and behind the projects under the Water Framework Directive. Thank you.
Thank you. Very good question. We're actually having an ongoing project this year when we're looking into bathing waters, more bathing sites within the central parts of the city. It's a project engaged by the politicians this year. So we are asking our citizens where they would like to bathe. So it's a direct connection to the citizens actually in that project. And we're also working with, of course, the flood directive, the drinking water directive, and so on. So we're trying to combine all these directives and all these important water issues when we are conducting measures, because most of the measures are actually beneficial to all directives, regardless if it's bathing water, drinking water, or the Water Framework Directive. Most of the, and the flood directive as well. Most of the measures are actually positive for most of the directives.
Great. Thank you very much. I have a question to our local speakers first, and then I will come back to you, Joachim. So we have the European Commission with us today, which is absolutely great. You have showcased innovative strategies, innovative action, innovative ideas. What would you need to replicate that across Europe? And what would you need from the European Commission, but also perhaps from your national governments? I don't know who would like to start. Sorry, I have to volunteer someone then. Jussi, can you start?
Thank you, Louise. This is a really good question. I mean, we would require support, but I have to say this is something that we are now at this point in our project. We're struggling with this. We're trying to develop. We need to capitalize, and think about the dissemination. But I don't know. I mean, we need support from politicians, obviously local politicians and so on, and take it in. Some of these issues are linked for that. I don't know.
So you would say political support, perhaps technical support at some point, financial support. I don't know if Turild, you would like to add something?
Well, I'm not sure, because in our case, I mean, we took matters into our own hands because we just expanded upon a project that was already there. We did in the beginning try with the Commission to get some funding from them because we struggled for a few years to get the extra funding. And the Commission were interested, but they weren't able to do so. And I guess my answer would be, it would have been nice if the Commission had some leeway, some flexibility when they see a great idea emerge so that they can jump on it instead of, because then we would probably have finished this a lot earlier. It took us 2 years to secure external financing.
Great. Thanks a lot, Turild. I don't know if, John, you would like to chip in?
Sure. Well, maybe down the same line, and we already had benefited from some of our innovation projects getting funding from the EU, and that is, of course, is good. If we on that part, and experience is that to apply for one of the EU programs, it's really a big task, and often the requirements to have really big. You have very big project organizations with many people involved. Means that it's administrative, very heavy thing it can be to carry through an application and also do the project. So maybe if it was possible to do more smaller or more lean light projects also, if that was a possibility, I think we would be interested in applying more that we have so far. And then the other thing I could mention for the EU, if you look across the EU, probably now I was talking about groundwater and drinking water. It's very different from one country to the other, but there are countries in the EU that are very similar in this respect, like in Denmark, where we use a lot of groundwater. And you could help facilitate maybe events like this with among countries and experts from these countries that are dealing with the same problems. So we learn from one another.
So exchange of best practices and capacity building, which is probably what the Commission is aiming at with the Zero Pollution Stakeholder Platform.
Yes.
But we're going to come back to that in a second. Perhaps, Juha, you would like to chip in on this topic, on this question?
Yes, it was a very good question. Thank you. I think, as some of you have already mentioned, economic support, of course, that we can search for funding from the EU to step up and do larger projects in collaboration with others that we share waters with. That is a very important thing to stress, I think. And then about the hydromorphological issues and the exemptions and heavily modified water bodies, I think most of the work done in Sweden, at least, has been focusing on hydropower plants in rivers and stream, and not so much in the urban environment. And I think a collaboration on the EU level and perhaps some joint work so that we can do the measures for reaching as long as possible for the hydromorphological status would be good, I think. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And as we were talking about funding, you may know that in the Recovery and Resilience Facility, the money needs to be channeled at 37% to the green transition. So it's very important for us, for local authorities, for regions, that this money is driven where we need to implement the zero pollution action plan, meaning in cities, in regions, at local level. So that was really on the funding part. But on collaboration, Joachim, I would like to come back to you. You have mentioned this zero pollution stakeholder platform on the model of the one you already have on circular economy, if I think. What would you recommend, to foster this collaboration? You have also talked about this flagship number 2, called Supporting Urban Zero Pollution Action. So what do you plan to have in this flagship initiative? And how are you going to organize also this stakeholder platform in order to really gather, this best practices, exchanges with local stakeholders?
Thank you for the question. And I turn my camera off just to make sure that the sound is good. Now, obviously, I think there are many answers to this because there's no one size fits all. So then there will not be one event and one meeting where we gather all practices and then everybody's happy. What I do like is also from the speakers and from the presentations is that you have already experienced and you're thinking of setting up also links to other projects or other regions, countries, cities who are doing similar projects. I think ultimately the EU and the countries we work with is a collaboration of people working on the ground. I mean, we in Brussels cannot orchestrate everything and say this is what you have to do and then everything's fine. I mean, we rely a little bit on your ingenuity and your self motivation to start this type of best practice exchanges. We will try to facilitate that, of course. Of course, we will set up a web page or guide you to existing web pages. One tool I wanted to highlight already, funding was mentioned, and the bureaucracy of funding. One tool that we're particularly proud of, that is, from my point of view, less administrative burdensome than others, is the so-called peer-to-peer tool. I don't know whether you heard that. It's in the context of the Environment Implementation Review. And there you can actually set up very easily workshops or little exchanges with other partners in Europe on certain topics that are dealing with implementation. And it's very flexible, and it's of course not a big financing source. It's really meant to bring people together. But from what my colleagues tell me, it's really not much to do in order to get some support to organize such an event. And nowadays, with doing most of these digital events, it's even easier. The other thing which I wanted to say is that I think what is really important, and that I think is for me one lesson that I've learned myself from the European Green Deal, is that you build partnerships and alliances across your thematic and political areas. So, of course, if you have a very specific project in a very specific area with a very specific focus, it is becoming more of a scientific project of a scientific interest. But I would encourage you to make it political. And it was mentioned in all the presentations, just don't get me wrong. How is your project linked to the climate agenda? What does it do for circular economy? Can we join up with colleagues who are doing something else there? Can we convince the government to put it in our national recovery plans? It's maybe too late now, but there are more. I think there's no more planning and programming coming. So I think that's really something that I think we need to do more, is that to combine our own challenges and our own projects that we have in mind with a bigger agenda that we are pursuing, and both at European global level as well as regional and local level. And the last thing is get engagement with those who you are doing this for. I mean, get your citizens behind the project. I mean, we heard some great examples. Again, don't misunderstand me. I heard all this I mean, the virtual reality is fantastic. The citizen science projects, or what you're doing on the Water Framework Directive, you said earlier, trying to speak to people. So I think all of these things are very important, and that's really the key. I mean, we're not doing that for our own pleasure or for getting a 9-to-5 job. We're having all a certain passion and conviction. We're doing this for people. And by remembering that, we maybe sometimes need to also speak the language of the people and not make it too technical and too detailed and too specific, but really is what's the ultimate benefit that this project can bring. And for example, I was thinking making a link is, what about the cycle path is the cleanest in the city? Are they going alongside the waterways and the rivers? And if not, why not? I mean, so there could be plenty of connections between various type of projects, and I think that really speaks to people. And I think the examples that I heard are fantastic. I will certainly take some of that out for my own experience. But really, that would be my long answer to a short question. Thank you.
But thanks a lot, Joachim. Very insightful, your answer. Thanks a lot. We are approaching the end of our session, so I would like to give a last word to our 5 speakers. If you want to finish this session with on a positive note, what would be your last word? So I will start with the ladies. Stuart, what would be your last word? You are muted, Stuart. Yes.
I think my last word is that the key to success, at least for us in this case, was to put together a wide variety of competences in a team, because that allowed us to achieve something that none of us would have been able to achieve by ourselves.
Thanks a lot. Jussi.
Thank you. I think for us, the main thing is, it's also be the hardest part for us is the citizen involvement. Try to get the citizens involved in the project. It's a hard work, it's a lot of work, but it really pays off in the end. So, then it just when you feel you're making a change and making a difference, when you actually reach the citizens of your city in your project. So that's the main thing. Yeah.
Great, citizen engagement. Thank you,
Yeah.
John.
Well, what I would say, we should always remember that prevention is better than treatment. And again, I can join with the involvement of people in what we are doing, the local people, and also getting together different sectors. For example, looking across from water to energy and see how you can make that link and make some good things out of that.
Great. So collaboration across sectors. Juha.
Well, thank you. Very interesting things and very wise things has already been said. So I would say that collaboration, together we can change the galaxy.
Amazing. So collaboration, Joachim, we are, as you have seen, cities and regions are absolutely keen to collaborate with the Commission to make sure that the Zero Pollution Action Plan is a success and is implemented at the local level. So your last word, perhaps?
Well, it's extremely difficult to add something. A lot has been said, which I fully agree. But I think for me, I think the message we want to give is the green and digital transition is happening, and we can all play a part in this, and we must all play a part in this. And it's an exciting challenge that I think can bring us all together and make the collaboration that you have referred to. So for me, it was very inspiring to listen to all of you. Thank you very much.
Amazing. Well, thank you very much. It's time for me to thank our dear speakers. Thank you very much for your very insightful presentation. I've learned as well a lot. I'm going to have many takeaways tonight. Thank you a lot, Joachim, for taking the time to be with us after this EU Green Week, which has been probably quite intense on your side. Thank you very much to all the participants for your attention. And I want to do a special thank you to the Nordic Capital Region EU offices that have organized this event. Thank you very much. I wish you an amazing day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.